Welcome back to the Old Photo Vault channel. The Pale Watcher, Nevada Gold Trail, 1887. They said Eli Mercer paused only a minute for the photograph, propping his pickaxe just so, eager to get back to the creek where flakes of gold winked in the mud. Nothing looked strange at first, just a prospector squinting toward the sun. But when the plate dried, a thin face appeared behind him, pale as creek water. Its eyes fixed on Eli as though it had been waiting. Some claimed it was Maid Dallinger, a miner's daughter lost in a shaft collapse the year before. Still wandering for someone to follow her home, Eli packed his gear the next morning and set off alone, chasing what he swore was a voice calling his name. He never returned, though the photograph stayed, and the face behind him seems to watch the door. The Hidden Face, Blackwood Trail, 2009. Most hikers remember that afternoon as ordinary. Dry leaves, soft light, the quiet ticking of insects in the brush. Marla only meant to rest a moment on the low branch, brushing her hair from her eyes while her friend snapped a photo. They didn't notice anything unusual until later, when the picture was enlarged on a laptop. The faint suggestion of a face pressed into the base of the tree, features soft as damp earth, watching her as if it had always been there. Locals say a boy named Rowan vanished on this trail years ago, last seen weaving between those same twisted trunks. Marla swore she didn't feel anything that day, no cold breath, no warning. But in the photo, the face seems to lean closer, as though it almost spoke. The Grandmother's Guest, Fairview Park, 1924. It was meant to be a simple picture. Mrs. Alden standing proudly with her two grandchildren, the three of them arranged neatly in the shade. Everyone remembered only those three. No one recalled another child wandering near, no small figure slipping close enough to be held. Yet when the photograph developed, there he was, a faint boy in the middle, his outline thin as smoke, his expression too solemn for a summer afternoon. Mrs. Alden stared at the print for a long while before admitting he looked like Samuel, her youngest, who drowned in the river nearly 20 years earlier. She said nothing more, only placed the picture face down in a drawer. Still, if you study the image now, the ghost child seems to lean gently toward her, as though answering a call she never spoke aloud. The Visitor in the Glass, Rose Hill Manor, 1907. Everyone agreed the bathroom was too warm that afternoon, the kind of heat that softened a person's thoughts and made small chores feel heavier. Lillian had only stepped into the tub to adjust her hem, laughing to herself at the mess she'd made. Gloves on the floor, ribbons trailing like shed petals. The photograph was taken quickly, almost carelessly, meant only to tease her sister. But when the print returned, Lillian stopped smiling. In the tall mirror beside her, a second figure leaned forward, darker, thinner than her reflection, its hand resting on the rim of the tub where no hand should be. Some said it resembled her mother, gone a year by then, still wandering the rooms she'd once kept immaculate. Lillian insisted it was only a trick of light, yet she never used that room again, and the mirror was quietly removed. The one who stood behind, Saint-Remy Military Ward, 1919. Most visitors remembered the ward as a quiet place, full of soft footsteps and flowers arranged by nurses who tried not to stare too long. Henri had insisted on a photograph with Etienne, his closest friend, hoping the small celebration of medals might steady the room's mood. Etienne kept his eyes closed. He did that often now. But Henri held him with an easy, practiced kindness. Only when the print returned did the men in the ward begin to murmur. Behind them, reflected in the framed glass, a third figure stood. Tall, blurred, its face pale and watching as though waiting to be acknowledged. Some said it resembled Captain Morin, the officer lost in the same blast that injured Etienne, a man who never received a grave. Henri put the photograph away after that, though he noticed the reflection seemed to lean forward each time he looked. as if listening for its name. The third presence, Ashwood Library House, 2003. They said the old reading room always felt a bit too warm at night, as if the fireplace still remembered its purpose long after the chimney went cold. Lydia and Mara posed there as a joke. Two friends playing at elegance, borrowing the velvet chairs and the soft yellow lamps for atmosphere. The shutter clicked, a little flash of white, nothing more. But when the photograph was printed, Lydia noticed something neither of them recalled. A set of pale legs extended across the armchair beside Mara, translucent, crossed at the ankles with the easy confidence of someone who believed they still belonged in the room. Some insisted it was Evelyn Ashwood, the heiress who vanished the winter the manor was sold, known for drifting from party to party without ever quite arriving. Lydia kept the photo anyway, though every time she studied it, the ghostly legs seemed to have shifted, just slightly, as if turning toward her. The figure in the studio, Whitcomb Atelier, 1911. They said the studio always smelled of linseed oil and old summer light, the kind that lingered on canvases long after the models had gone home. Clara was posing for a study in drapery that afternoon, perched on a trimmed block, trying not to shift as the photographer arranged his plates. Nothing felt strange, just the familiar hush of brushes soaking in jars and the ticking of a distant clock. But when the print emerged, Clara noticed the faint blur beside the pillar. A tall, pale figure standing too still, its edges dissolving like breath on glass. Some whispered it was Lydia Marrow, a previous model who vanished after leaving the studio one rainy evening, her unfinished portrait tucked behind a cupboard for years. Clara claimed she never sensed a presence. Yet in the photograph, the figure seems angled toward her, as if waiting for her to turn and finally see it. The passenger between cars, Northern Line Express, 1908. The morning ride north was uneventful, the kind of gentle sway and soft clatter that lulled most travelers into reading or daydreaming. Margaret had settled by the window with her sketchbook, pleased by the thin winter light sliding across the seats. Her sister, Louise, read quietly behind her, barely noticing the photographer who asked for a quick snapshot to capture two ladies at leisure. But when the print arrived, a third presence appeared between the train cars, a blurred figure outside the window, standing impossibly close to the rattling gap where no one could safely stand. Conductors whispered it matched the description of Daniel Fry, a porter swept off that very section of track the year before, said to still be seen pacing the couplings on foggy mornings. Margaret kept the photo tucked into her book after that, though she remarked once, very softly, that the figure seemed to grow clearer each time she looked. The face in the Brushwood, Older Lane, 1912. It was only meant to be a playful photograph. Helen teasing Joseph as he tried to look serious, the two of them framed by the thick tangle of shrubs behind the farm. The afternoon was warm, the sort that made laughter feel easy, and neither of them noticed anything but each other. When the plate dried, though, Helen studied the print longer than usual. Just above Joseph's dark hair, woven into the brush like a knot of shadow, a pale face pressed forward, small, sharp-featured, its eyes fixed not on Joseph, but on her. Some said it resembled Nora Finch, a girl who vanished in those woods years before, last seen wandering near the very hedge behind them. Helen never mentioned the photograph again, but she began avoiding Alder Lane afterward, certain she'd feel someone breathing close to her ear if she ever returned. The woman beside the statue. Greywood Gardens, 1899. It was a mild afternoon, the sort that made the paths of Greywood Gardens feel orderly and safe. Eleanor had coaxed her cousins, Clara and Justine, into a portrait on the bench. The little dog arranged neatly on Clara's lap, while the photographer fussed with his tripod. Nothing seemed unusual, only the rustle of skirts and the distant hiss of the fountain. But when the print was delivered, Clara noticed a fourth figure standing beside the marble statue, a tall woman draped in a dim, colorless veil, her outline too soft, her face fixed in a quiet, mournful stare. Garden keepers whispered it looked like Mary Hales, the groundskeeper's wife, who died the year the statue was installed, said to wander the paths, searching for something she left unfinished. Eleanor dismissed it as a flaw in the plate, though she kept glancing over her shoulder each time she visited the gardens afterward, as though expecting someone to fall into step beside her. The Man Between the Tools, Nolan and Hart Forge, 1903. Most days in the forge followed the same dependable rhythm. The ring of hammer on steel, the hiss of water, the warm smell of coal drifting into the rafters. Thomas and Everett posed for the photograph only because the traveling salesman insisted their shop looked properly industrious. They stood where they always worked, comfortable in the clutter of tongs and horseshoes, certain nothing was out of place. But when the plate hardened, a third figure appeared between them. Tall, half-formed, its coat hanging as though soaked, its head bowed just enough to avoid their eyes. Old workers muttered it looked like Walter Griggs, the apprentice who vanished after slipping near the quench pit one winter morning, his body never found beneath the dark water. Everett kept the picture pinned behind a cupboard, though sometimes he'd swear he heard an extra set of footsteps circling the anvil after sundown, pausing exactly where the figure stood. The face on the coat. Outpost Yard, 1916. It was an ordinary moment, or so it seemed. Eric adjusting his belt, John squinting toward the pale yard, both men waiting for the photographer to finish his counting. The stillness felt typical of the outpost. Thin light, dry air, nothing moving except the faint drift of dust near the steps. But when the photograph was printed, John stared longer than Eric expected. On the dark coat he wore that day, just above the fold of fabric near his chest, a face appeared. Small, gaunt, its eyes set deep as bruises, watching from the cloth as though pressed into it by a hidden hand. Some said it resembled Olaf, the patrolman who froze in the forest months earlier, never recovered, his uniform missing when they found his tracks ending in the snow. John denied recognizing it, yet he never wore that coat again, claiming the fabric felt warm whenever he touched it, as if someone inside was trying to breathe. The shape behind The Hunter, Calcutta Studio, 1904. The portrait was meant to look triumphant. Edwin standing tall with his rifle, his loyal dog posed atop the tiger pelt the photographer insisted would add a sense of grandeur. The studio air smelled of dust and chemical varnish, and Edwin held himself still, imagining how proudly the picture would hang in his father's study. Nothing felt amiss. Only the warm hum of lamps and the faint crackle of the painted jungle backdrop. But once the print dried, a pale figure emerged in the foliage behind him, its outline soft as smoke, its face turned toward Edwin rather than the camera. Some whispered it resembled Arjun, the tracker lost on Edwin's last expedition, swallowed by the marsh the same day their hunt ended. Edwin dismissed the rumor, yet he later admitted he could not look at the photograph without feeling someone standing just behind his shoulder, close enough that the dog seemed to sense it too. The child at the railing. Krestovaya Dacha, 1897. The family had crowded the steps in good humor, settling into the usual confusion of skirts, elbows, and half-finished conversations. The bearded uncle, Mikhail, took his place by the railing, leaning there with the calm of someone long accustomed to being in the background of such scenes. Nothing felt unusual. Only the soft groan of the house beams and the scent of pine drifting in from the yard. But when the photograph was developed, a small face appeared beside Mikhail's shoulder, just at the edge of the carved railing. A child's face, pale and watchful, with eyes too large for the blur of its features. No one in the family recognized it. Some whispered it might be Yuri, Mikhail's son who died the winter the house was finished, barely 5. Gone before any photograph could be taken of him. Afterward, Mikhail avoided the railing entirely. He said nothing, but family members swore he never looked at that spot again. Except once, quickly, as though hoping the child might still be there. The shadow at the tree. Hollingsworth Orchard, 1905. It was a warm afternoon. The sort that softened every edge of the orchard into something gentle. Eleanor and Ruth had stepped aside from the family gathering, pausing under the old apple tree where the light fell in a quiet, slanting way. They stood close, speaking in low voices, sister things, half worries, half comforts. While the photographer, eager to catch the moment, framed them in his circular lens. No one noticed anything unusual then. The branches stirred, the grasses leaned, all perfectly ordinary. Only after the print was developed did Ruth gasp. At the base of the tree, in the deep patch of shade, a figure seemed to be crouching. A faint, pale outline, shaped like a person kneeling, its head tilted as though listening. Some whispered it was Clara Hollingsworth, the aunt who vanished in that orchard decades before, last seen walking toward this very tree at dusk. Eleanor never returned to that spot, claiming the air there felt too still, as if someone were holding their breath just out of sight. The Boy Behind the Barracks, Fort Briarwood, 1943. The afternoon had been easy, almost joyful. Tom and Ray fooling around after drills, the heat still clinging to the packed dirt between the long rows of barracks. Someone joked that they looked like brothers. So Tom grabbed Ray by the arm and laughed for the camera, both of them squinting into the sun. Nothing moved except a bit of dust swirling at their ankles. But when the photograph was developed, Ray went quiet. Behind them, half faded into the light, stood the figure of a small boy, too short to be a recruit, too still to be running past. His outline blurred at the edges, yet the tilt of his head was unmistakably curious, as if he had stepped forward to join them. Old soldiers whispered about Peter Monroe, the cook's son who died of fever the previous winter, still said to wander the yard, looking for his father's voice. Tom insisted it was only a trick of light, though afterward he made a habit of turning around whenever he walked past the barracks at dusk, certain someone small was following just a few steps behind. The walker at the open grave, St. Aldwyn Cemetery, 1931. The photographer had come only to document storm damage, the way the rain had cracked old stones and pulled iron fences out of alignment. The air hung thick and cold. Even the crows kept their distance. He stepped carefully between the leaning monuments, noting the strange collapse of earth near the angel statue, as though something beneath had shifted upward rather than down. The picture he took seemed ordinary at first, ruin and winter light. Only later did he notice the figure. A blurred shape walked past the open grave, its form too pale for a living man, its steps too light to disturb the soaked leaves. The head was bowed, as if studying the broken coffin, or perhaps recognizing it. Some said it was Elias Moore, buried in that very plot and known to complain bitterly in life that no one ever visited him. After the photograph surfaced, groundskeepers swore they sometimes saw footprints in the mud leading away from the grave, never toward it, as though someone were already out, wandering. The miner at the tunnel mouth, Ash Hollow Shaft, 19 to 12. Work had stopped for the day, the dust settling in slow, tired drifts along the tracks. Samuel posed where the foreman asked him to stand, right at the tunnel mouth, boots planted, hands relaxed, the dark of the mine yawning behind him like a second, silent room. He didn't mind. The stillness after a long shift felt almost companionable. When the photograph was developed, however, something else had kept him company. To the right of the frame, half hidden among the brush, a blurred figure stood just beyond the scattered planks. Tall, indistinct, its face lifted toward Samuel as though waiting for him to acknowledge it. Some swore it looked like Jonah Pike, the miner who disappeared after a collapse the previous spring. His body never recovered from the rubble. Samuel saved the print anyway, though he later admitted he never again walked out of the tunnel without glancing to that same patch of ground, certain someone would be standing there, trying to catch up to him. The shape in the window. Novaya Street apartment, 1984. The room still smelled of smoke long after the fire crews had gone. soot clinging to the curtains, walls stained in uneven strokes where the heat had licked upward. Someone had opened the window to let the cold night air push through, rattling the wilted flowers on the table and stirring the dust on the old radiator. Nothing moved beyond that. The apartment felt hollowed out, as if even the memories had been burned away. Only when the resident returned to take photographs for insurance did he notice the smear on the window's glass. Not a mark. A figure, tall, dim, its outline shaped like a person standing on the other side of the pane, features blurred as though pressed from within the darkness. Neighbors whispered about Irina, the woman who died in the fire 2 nights earlier, trapped in the hallway when the stairwell collapsed. He tried to tell himself it was just smoke residue. But each time he raised the camera, the figure seemed a little clearer, a little closer to the glass. The figure in the dust, San Miguel Corridor, 1937. The morning was so quiet that even the old boards beneath Doña Isabella barely creaked as she stepped onto the long, shaded corridor. She paused there, wrapped in her dark shawl, watching the wind slip between the posts and scatter dust across the empty walkway. The photographer, visiting from the capital, admired her stillness and asked for a quick portrait. She agreed with a small nod. She had lived long enough to be patient with strangers. Nothing strange happened while the shutter clicked. The dog at the far end of the corridor didn't bark, the air barely moved, and Doña Isabella simply held her pose. But when the photograph was developed, a pale streak stood behind her, shaped almost like a person, thin and upright, made of dust and light. Some whispered it was her son Mateo, lost decades earlier in a flood, said to wander back home whenever the season turned dry. Doña Isabella never confirmed it, though after seeing the picture, she began sweeping the corridor each dawn, as if clearing a path for someone she expected to follow her steps. And that's where we'll leave tonight's journey through these haunted photographs. Old film fades, names are forgotten, yet some faces refuse to disappear, hiding in the corners of family snapshots and quiet hallways. Now, I want to hear from you. Which picture unsettled you the most? Did you notice anything I didn't mention? An extra hand, a strange shadow, a blurred figure in the background? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to mark the timestamp so we can all go back and look again. If you enjoyed spending a few minutes in the dark with me, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next collection of cursed images. Until then, check your own photos carefully. You never really know who is standing behind you.